Julia Gandrud. It's so great to have you here on Creative, actually. You're a writer, artist, creativity coach, and strengths-focused editor. That's a lot. And as I understand, you're also extremely well educated. You have an MFA in film from the San Francisco Art Institute and an MA in art education from Rhode Island College. You're an Enneagram Coach, Fictionary Certified Editor, and member of the EFA, and a speculative fiction writer. Okay, wow. So super excited to have you on the show today. Let's start with why you became an editor, because it's clear that you're very, very interested in art. So how do those two things overlap?
That's a good question. So I have been doing both writing and creating visual art my whole life. It was always a little bit of a question which one was strongest. Sometimes I make comics and I really mix the two of them. And sometimes I make animations. And again, that mixes the two of them. But the editing part, like all of us, I got really interested in story structure through recognizing what I didn't know. That might be what distinguishes writers from people who aren't interested in writing. Like we see the story happening and why did they make that choice? Specifically a friend, when I was a teenager, a friend and I, she was so brilliant and we went to watch a movie together. I enjoyed it so much. And at the end, she said, well, yeah, but we knew how it was going to end. And then she named a point in the movie and she said, oh, when this happened, I knew how it was going to end. And it blew my mind. Like, what magic do you have? And so I started paying more attention to being able to predict the flow of a story, which as a writer and an editor, that's a vital skill. This friend was just born with that skill. So it was, wonderful. But I, at that moment, started to pay a lot of attention. I'd been, a hungry reader, reading constantly. And I was just along for the ride up until she said that. And when I wrote stories, I didn't really understand how to end them. I had a sort of feel for, and then maybe now you wrap up kind of feeling. I do hear from writers and editors that there are a lot of writers out there who always go by the feel and now this should happen, which is great. If that works for them, that's wonderful. But I think that you start seeing the patterns, you can't not see them, and you start to have some expectations even when you're reading. So I wanted to understand what causes my expectation as a reader, what causes the feeling of a good story. And the more I learned, by nature, I like to teach. I like to gather information and then share it. I love seeing so much. I love seeing the moment when someone else takes a pivotal moment, a moment of problem or change, and then understands it and then grows. And that's what happens when you're a writer and you work with an editor. That's what happens when you're an artist and you work with a teacher, or even when you're an artist and you talk to a friend who is a really good critique partner. So being able to take all of the information I've been gathering all of my life, really trying to understand what secret knowledge this 14-year-old friend had, and then try to share it with other people. It really came home maybe back in 2008 or 2010 was the first time I finished a full-length first draft. And it was so much fun. And by the end of the novel, I had completely shifted protagonists. I did that again for another novel where I had, I started out with one protagonist and ended with another. And then I hit the wall of, okay, now what? What do I do with this? This is too embarrassing for me to send off to an editor. And I wasn't getting any agents. So I decided to learn how to edit more formally my own work. And all along, I've been editing nonfiction for other people. I was educated in Catholic schools up until college. And those nuns would beat an essay into essay structure. So I became very fluent in nonfiction structure. And so from very early on, somebody had an email, I would read it for them. They had a paper, I would read it for them, give them feedback. And then I've had editors in my family. So it was a natural thing. I lived with my sister and my aunt for a period of time. My sister's a writer and editor as well. My aunt was editor for local government publications, and she would happily edit my things as well. It was just that part of it was very natural. But the real key was watching a movie with my 14-year-old friend. Shout out to Sarah and Romy and Michelle high school reunion. That was really fun.
I love that movie. I really enjoyed that.
That's so cute. I'm glad you know it.
Of course I know it. Gen Xer here. It was totally relatable, but yeah, it was hilarious. So that's actually a great answer, because what I love about what you said there was you chose editing simply because you were curious about the secret architecture behind the story. I feel like you are someone who's very good at seeing patterns and then understanding how to make them work even better or more efficiently. Because I've looked at your approach to being an editor, and I think you have a lot to offer people, especially fiction writers, in how you look at the stories. Some editors, they just look at the story in a very flat way, but you go quite deep. And I love that. Do you have a Substack or anything where you share your learnings? Because it sounds like you have a lot to teach and share.
I currently have one that is about the Enneagram, enneagramwriting.substack.com. And yeah, I do write about how the Enneagram is a 9-type system. It's not prescriptive, so not like astrology. It has some flavor of astrology in that you start to really feel like somebody will say, oh, that person's such an Aries, which is prescriptive, of course, and it can be wrong. But it's fun because once somebody says, oh, they're such a Leo, I don't know if you are an astrology person, you become fluent in the language of like somebody gives that feeling of big smile, sunny personality, a little bit social. But what it adds is that you understand which type you are. You talk to other people, you can take tests online. They cannot be accurate enough. The Enneagram goes much, much deeper to understand hidden things. And you just can't get that from a test. But you can from conversations like you would with a psychoanalyst, for example. We're really going to get into the substrata. And it helps to identify patterns of your desires, your motivations, your blindness, which I think is maybe one of the most important things, and what you assume everybody else experiences. And I think that's fabulous for constructing characters.
When I first got to know you, I knew you as the Enneagram girl because you talked a lot in the community where I met you. Then I started to read your Substack. I had heard of Enneagrams, but I never really looked into it. I never really felt like I needed to. But then you mentioned something in one of your Substack posts where you said finding out what your Enneagram is tells you a lot about yourself. And that sort of self-knowing can inform how you write your characters a little bit, if I understood correctly. And I thought, oh, I like that. Okay. So I did go and do a test online because I'm here in Poland to be with my partners. I don't really have much contact with English speaking people. So I did that one. I forget what it's called, but it's the one that's the official one. It starts with an R.
Oh, yeah, from the Enneagram Institute.
So I took that one and I came up with a number and I was like, that sounds right. And I went away for a while. I'm like, but this part isn't exactly right. And that part maybe isn't. And so I thought more and more about it. And it turns out that it's a little more complicated. Just as you said, it's not just like a one and done thing. So what are the Enneagram numbers and what do they represent?
Yeah. So the 9 types, they're all incredibly complex, and all of us have a little bit of each of the types in them. So we're really looking at what your dominant type might be. And then you will start to see what type you go toward in a stressful situation, what type you go toward in a very satisfying, fulfilling situation. That can also help you understand what dominant type you are by looking at which ones you go towards. So there are 3 basic groupings out of these 9. There's heart, which is a feeling center, the pleasing center. Then there's head, which is the thinking and fearing center. And then there's the gut, which is the acting and the anger. So I find it's easiest to start looking at which one of the triads you are first and then break it down.
Okay. So a listener would have to think, am I a heart, head, or gut first?
Yes. So when you are making a decision, for example, do you either ignore your head or overthink things? So that would be the head center. Ignoring your head is the 6, for example, because it's like a fish in water. They're not aware of the water. They're not aware of the amount of thinking. So if you notice that you either tend to think things out a lot or you resist thinking things out, then you're probably in the head center. If you tend to either really value feelings and your own feelings and other people's feelings and think that that's the most important thing, or if you suppress your feelings or you think that they're dangerous or unimportant, your emotion, not your physical feelings, if you suppress those or you over-index emotions, other people's or your own, then that's the heart triad. If you are somebody who is impatient when there's a lack of action, you're the gut triad. Even the 9s who are remarkable in their inaction, they're frustrated when there's a lack of action and they'll take charge. If nobody's standing up to take charge, okay, I will. I'll go from the gut triads. So the 8, the type 8 is the one, you can always identify the 8 in the room because they're not reluctantly in charge. They are sure they're in charge. They are the commander. They're really fun characters. A lot of stories written about the Enneagram involve people saying, the buck stops here. I am the one who will protect everyone else. Who else is going to do it? I will. So they're very action and force oriented. They're afraid of being vulnerable and harmed or controlled by others. The strengths coach, Becca Syme, had this wonderful analogy. She said, they live in a castle, they own the castle, but it's a castle with a steering wheel. And they are the only ones allowed to touch the steering wheel. So everybody wings one direction or another. Enneagram 9, the peacemaker, they often can appear to feel a little bit like an 8 or a little bit like a 1, but they appear to get along and be happy. Their internal life is quite different, and either they're aware of it or they're not. It can be a full category 5 storm inside, but they seem to be peaceful. Their fear is of being separated or excluded. They're very helpful to have in a room because they can try to help everybody understand each other and get along. A lot of writers are 9s because we're so interested in each of these characters. Why would they do this thing? The Enneagram 1, I think of them as the judge, a curator. They want to be good and perfect and beyond reproach. Their fear is of being defective. Like, think of the infant. What was dangerous? So was it dangerous to be defective? Everybody wants to be better and perfect. Just let's assume that that's the one. The 2 is the giver. They want to feel needed because being needed means they'll be loved. So their fears of not being needed or wanted because then they're not lovable anymore. So now we've moved from, 8, 9, and 1, that was the gut triad. We've moved into the heart triad. So 2 is the externalized heart triad. They take all of their feelings and they go out into the public square with them. So they're the people who make cookies. A lot of registered nurses are 2s. They know so much. They are so skilled, but they'll stand back and try to get other people to lead, to express their needs. We could talk lots more about the 2s. I find them a really interesting character. The Enneagram 3 is a lot of the high achievers that you see out in the world where people say, just do what I do and you too will achieve greatness. Those are 3s, like across the board. Oprah Winfrey, 3. Taylor Swift, 3. A lot of Olympians, 3s. They have medals on their walls. They like to achieve things. They like to get stamps on their books. And they can feel glossy and presentation-oriented. But when I said the center of each triad is the one that suppresses, they're the ones that try not to value their heart, but they have so much feeling. The 9 has so much capacity for action, but they suppress it. The 3 has such depth of feeling that they just can't access. It's like a well that's been paved over. It's there. So they are afraid of not having worth, not getting love because they haven't shown themselves worthy of accolades. They can only get love if they've achieved things. They have to feel recognized and valued in order to get love. The type 4 is the internalized feeling. They want to be authentic. and they want to have an identity. So they want to be known for their authentic identity. Things might have happened where somebody blurred the lines, or they were just naturally inclined to be tapped into somebody else's deep experience, usually like one person's deep experience when they were little. So their fears of not being distinct, not being authentic, and not being an individual. You'll see a lot of them hoping for a rescue. And a growth arc is for them to find how beautiful they are in the most mundane things, how they have an identity without needing to express it, how authentic and distinct they are without having to be any more different than they already are. The Enneagram 5, they're the academic. There's a little bit of a withholding feeling for an Enneagram 5. So now we're switching into the head center. The fear there is that they won't be capable, that other people will take their energy, their time, their thoughts away. They feel very vulnerable to the outside world. So they kind of lock themselves away in the ivory tower a little bit. They feel like they need to figure everything out so they can be sufficiently wise, sufficiently able to meet any challenge. They grow toward the Enneagram 8, which we talked about earlier, the one with the castle. That is, they get more physical, they get more capable. And when you think about Sherlock Holmes or Lisbeth Salander, there are lots of Enneagram 5s in mysteries. There are a lot of 8s, 9s, and 5s who are the investigators in mysteries. The 5 can feel a little bit impoverished personally about their inner resources. So a big growth is for them to realize how many inner resources they actually have, how strong they actually are. So the Enneagram 6, also one of my favorites, because they are afraid of not being safe enough. They are amazing leaders because they assume that everyone in their group being safe, and their group is pretty big. That group well-being and safety is supreme. That's why they do everything, because if everybody is safe, then they are safe. So they're afraid, they need safety, they need support. So the reason they make great leaders is that you can assume, for the most part, with a 6, they'll have their crabby moments. They'll snipe just like anybody else. And they can really snipe because they're the thinkers. They don't realize it, but they're really the thinkers. But they will do things for the good of everyone, intuitive, because otherwise they know that they're not safe. So they are not the preppers. Yes, they will have cans, or they'll buy extra toilet paper. They'll do that. They'll have resources. They'll put padding on the corners of furniture. They'll make sure everything's insured. They are those people, but they're not the people who are going to go off in a silo. They are not those people because they know that that's a fantasy, that they will not be fine if there's an apocalypse. They know that. They know that in order to keep everyone safe, to keep themselves safe, they have to extend the silo so that other people don't feel left out. Well, they can feel left out, but if other people feel in need or underserved, then that's a threat. That's a threat. Other people's lack of security is a threat to their security. They're really fun characters. They can take on leadership. They can be very clear about what's going to happen several steps ahead of time. They tend to be right. If a 6 in your life says, ooh, I think this is heading down such and such a road, you probably should listen. So the Enneagram 7 is the only one I've ever met who's like, yeah, I'm totally an Enneagram 7. So they are the you only live once type person, because something early on probably let them know how fleeting life is. And they're afraid of missing out on it. They got a glimpse of all of the beauty and joy and resources, and they're just running toward it. They think they can, though, which can be the tragedy of a 7 story. So it's going to be the Peter Pan, there are going to be good times, Captain Jack. It catches up to them because it's within them. They never leave it behind. They think they're running away and leaving things behind. They're running toward joy and light and leaving darkness and cynicism behind. They're really good at externalizing all of those things, making it somebody else. And then it turns out it was all within you all along. The big bad wolf was you. So they make a great story too. When Captain Jack sacrifices for Elizabeth, it's understanding every once in a while your own responsibility in a situation. They can be a total magician and make things happen. So they're the last one in the head triad. They like to try to figure things out. Okay, so I gave you the 9 types in brief. Did anything resonate?
I think it's kind of cross between 6 and 7 for me. I'm a little bit like a person that can see things 3 steps ahead and can prepare for it kind of thing. But also the thought of burying myself in a bunker for 10 years is just like, no, I'll just stay up top and go with the rest. I don't want to do that. That would just be my worst nightmare. So that kind of really struck a chord with me. But also the 7 in the sense that they only live once. I do have a sense, it's very deep in me, that life is so fleeting. And even as a teenager, I was very aware that time was short and I had to make the best of the time I had. And I determined, even as a youngster, that I would see as much of the world as I could. And yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot, not of the whole world, but of certain parts of the world. I've really gone for it. And it's been a big part of my journey to just sort of keep moving. And there's a real hunger, like, oh, the clock's ticking. What haven't you experienced? What haven't you seen? And it's mostly just that I feel like I'm more interested in investing in experiences than I am in collecting possessions. So my possessions are experience. So I can lay in my bed at night and I can think about many different things or watch movies and it'll be like, oh yeah, I was there. Oh yeah, I know that language. Oh yeah, I was there. And it's nice. It's really, really nice. But at the same time, living like that has its drawbacks because I see all my contemporaries settled down, adult children, and house practically paid off. And they did the exact opposite as me. They just stayed where they were and built a life. And I built like 5 different lives, you could say, each a completely different chapter. So 7 was a little bit shouty at me as well. But I was also thinking, aside from that, as a writer, I have a series. And in my series, I have a very gray villain. I mean, he's a villain, but he's a little gray too. And I was listening. I was like trying to figure out where he went in there. Obviously, you would say an 8 because of the whole, this is my castle. And if there's a steering wheel, I'm the only one allowed to touch it. That's definitely that guy for sure. And people have written to me and said, oh, I really liked your villain because it was a little hard to hate him because he wasn't just like bad guy. There was like parts of him that were very human. And I think that when I'm listening to you talk about the Enneagram, I'm thinking this is a brilliant tool for writers to use, creating their characters, because I think that's what makes a character really resonate with readers, is that they are complex. They're not cookie cutter, 2-dimensional. They have one job and that's it. And they don't really feel anything else or think about anything else or do anything else. And so everything that you're saying is telling me it's opening the door for writers who are creating characters to really go deep into what's going on with the character. And also, I get the feeling there's certain types that fit best with certain genres. Like you mentioned, a 2. That seems like a pretty classic romance genre character.
There are a lot of 2s in romances.
And then you mentioned the people who investigate mysteries are 5s and 9s. And what was the other one?
8s. There are a lot of cop procedurals. 8s all over the place. Terry Pratchett.
I love Terry Pratchett. You're the second guest that's mentioned Terry Pratchett to me. So that's awesome. I love Terry Pratchett's books so much.
So Tiffany Aching and Vimes and Granny Weatherwax are all great Enneagram 8s. But what you described with your bad guy was like exactly, so there's a direction of growth and the direction of disintegration. And I'm moving away from that. You know, like how are they in happier times and how are they in more stressed times? I think that's, personally, I prefer that.
So in stressful times, he's totally under control. He's completely cold, completely calculated, like 4D chess, 4 steps ahead. Even when everything fell apart, even when his world was being destroyed, he protected his woman and took great harm to himself to save her because she was in a more vulnerable situation. And it looked like he was going to lose everything, but he was just going to keep going. So I kind of admire that.
So that's a 2. That's an 8 in times of great acts of heroism. They take on a lot of the qualities of a 2. So what you just described is an 8 who is taking on qualities of a 2. That's really cool. Of course, it resonated with readers because they were like, oh yeah, this complexity sounds right, feels right.
Would you be willing to share if you figured out your Enneagram number, or are you still working that out?
That's actually like my example of how the test is not enough. So the test is a great start because it is a process of self-inquiry. That's why we write. We're trying to explore reality and story and people. And so what a wonderful pursuit to continue to try to understand your own motivations, own fears, desires, unconscious responses that you would have to a stressful situation and unconscious responses that you would have to a blissful, happy, secure situation. So I took all the tests. I think I have taken just about every test out there. And every time, without fail, the tests tell me that I'm an Enneagram 5. And an Enneagram 5, I'll give one of my favorite resources is from the narrative Enneagram. And that is Dr. David Daniels, who passed away. If you go and look at his description, there are lots of different sites with their different descriptions. If you look at his descriptions, I'm literally pulling it up right now, of a 5, it is not me. So let's see, a strength being dependable and ascetic. I'm a little bit seed in the wind. Dispassionate and calm in the crisis. Absolutely never. Not calm in the crisis. I get very focused, but I do not get calm. Dispassionate. Absolutely not. When I started to read the strengths, I understood why they typed me as a 5. I'm fascinated about acquiring more knowledge, but I'm not in my head the way a 5 would be. I'm thoughtful, but I feel it in my gut, not between my ears, behind my eyes. I appreciate simplicity, but I also appreciate absolute chaos. So there are lots of things where I was looking at all of those strengths and the description, it didn't sit. And then I read accounts of all of the types. And people started telling me that I was an Enneagram 9. And I really rejected that, which is often a sign that that's the right one. There are some exceptions. The Enneagram 6, if somebody tells them they're an Enneagram 6, they might say, oh yeah, that feels right. It might feel right to, so there are a handful of them. The Enneagram 2 might recognize it, but usually they think they're a 4. Usually might be going overboard, but it's common for them to think they're a 4. The 1 who loves order and creating a rule system. There was somebody who ran a store in Providence called the Curatorium, and he made this beautiful store of beautifully curated items. It was a fabulous store. And he was clearly a 1, you could tell about what he cared about. The 7, somebody says, you love fun. And they're like, oh yeah, that's me. But the 9 is described as a peacemaker and like the Big Lebowski, the dude, laid back. I am so not laid back. And my internal experience is not of being a peacemaker at all. So a lot of the types will read the description. I would say aside from the 7, I've seen everybody read the description and say, ouch. Whereas if you read someone else's description, all of us have all of the types within us. I just want to be clear. None of us are slotted in a box. It's a dominant type. It's nothing else. So I wouldn't look at it and say, well, I can't be that because I have this other thing. Well, you should. You should have a little bit of each of the motivations in you because you're complex. But that hits too close to home, or, that's insulting even, is often a sign that that's because it's very personal, what you just read. That's not a rule either. My experience after a long time of exploring is that I am Enneagram 9 because I take in everyone's experience. The 9 is considered the one that has the most of everybody's experience in it, which makes it very confusing for 9s. But the driving motivations tend to be to try to deal with the fact that you are getting everybody's input. And so the reason they're called the peacemaker is for how they then deal with all of that. Either they become slightly more interested in controlling their environment to try to dampen it from the outside, or they numb. They numb through a lot of different ways. They numb through smiling. They numb through not announcing their needs and desires, because how could they possibly compete with the world's needs and desires? So they step away. They're really good at self-abandonment. If you are writing your own novel and you're starting to feel like everybody's you can start to identify, oh, what is it about my characters that are me? I can't condemn people writing their own character, their own type. I think it's fine. But it's good to be aware if you're doing it. I think it's a great choice. So, for example, reading a romance by an Enneagram 2 author where the characters are all Enneagram 2s, That's fine. They're helpful. They're supportive. They care about the needs of other people. They will intuit the needs of other people. They will never announce their own needs. And they get really upset when other people don't intuit their needs. They feel terrified of announcing their desires, but they have desires. They're very in their body. They're good at loving other people, but in a too meddlesome way, sometimes in a strings attached way. But at their highest self, they're supremely good at understanding the help other people need. So there are wonderful points of contention that you can start finding. If you aren't aware of what your own motivations are and you're writing your character, you might miss opportunities. Like there's a moment when you could create conflict because somebody is so afraid of stating their own desires and they feel like they have righteous justification for expecting different treatment from the other person. And it's going to take a lot for them to overcome this and express their own needs and desires and to let the other person express themselves the way they need to not take it personally when they can't understand on an intuitive level and still make it work. That's a beautiful transformational moment when you're looking for the dark night of the soul. The understanding your own blindnesses is really, oh, here it is on the tray. Here's your dark night of the soul.
Gosh, I could just talk to you for ages about this. I'd love to talk with you another time about building a villain. I'm a little bit aware that if I said to you, oh, which number is the villain? Then you'll be like, well, but some people are that number themselves, and then they'll label themselves as what, the villain? So that doesn't work, right?
We're all the villain.
We all have a little bit of villainy in us.
Totally. Each number can be a villain, really great villain.
Well, if we think of someone who's bullied us in childhood or at school or a partner that wasn't very fair with us, we could maybe figure out their number. But I want to stay away from this sort of one and done thing. Oh, you're this number, that's it. I want to go in a little bit more with you about the nuances of this and how writers can create a really gray villain that works. Because people have asked me, how did you do it? And I'm like, I don't know. It just happens, which is completely unhelpful. So maybe through you, we can maybe take apart my villain.
I'd love to. Yeah, your villain sounds good. Yeah, villains are so much fun from the point of view of Enneagram because it has so much to do with your own type.
And I thought I was maybe a 6 or 7, so maybe I'm an 8 and a 2. I don't even know. You see, I don't even know.
I think that's really interesting because when we talked last time, you described how you write, where you disappear into the world. And I was like, that is so head triad. But you also have the deep feeling. So I see both. I see the 6 and I see the 7. And I am a 9 who wings 8. So there's also the question of where do you wing? So could you be a 7 who wings 6 or a 6 who wings 7? That might mean you have a lot of attributes of both. It's really fun. And nothing is rigid. One thing I'll say is that people don't tend to change types over their lifetime, but we do all have all the types within us. So your dominant type tends to stay your dominant type. But let's say you were a 6, you might notice moments of feeling other people holding you. Or you might notice moments of achieving and accomplishing things. Whereas if you were a 7, you might notice moments of really focusing on a particular project, really exploring and getting more specific rather than scattershot widespread. You might get really honed in and focused a little more on a project in moments where you're feeling pretty safe. And then in moments where you're feeling like, oh, the life is running out, you might go a little more in the direction of, here are the rules, here's a little more hard removed intellectualism at the 1. So yeah, there are just all kinds of fun things.
So do you coach people on Enneagram, writing with Enneagram?
Yes, I coach people in the creative process with Enneagram. I don't do it for therapy because I'm not a therapist, but absolutely for the creative process and for editing. Yeah, it's really, really helpful. Comes in different moments for everybody. Sometimes I do book coaching, creative coaching, and sometimes creative coaching looks a lot more like being an executive accountability buddy, which I think most creatives kind of need. But I do all of those, and I can really help people understand the motivations of their characters. Would this character do this at this moment? How do we know? Here are all the clues you've given.
Where can people find you if they're interested in working with you?
juliagandrud.com. You can also get in touch with me through the Substack, enneagramwriting.substack.com, or Julia Likes Frogs. I have an art site. If you email me through any of those or contact me through any of those, I will get that.
Thank you so much, Julia. It's been really wonderful chatting with you, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Likewise. It's wonderful talking with you, Elizabeth, and I had so much fun hearing about your experience and your character.